Hi everybody, welcome to this week's show. Today we've got Mark Carnegie from MH Carnegie Co. Many of you will know Mark over his long and distinguished career as an alternative asset manager across private equity and venture capital. He's got 30 years of experience as an investor, entrepreneur and corporate advisor in New York, London and Sydney. And his latest venture is MHC Digital Finance, which is a digital currency and emerging technology asset manager, which is really focused on the Metaverse, Web 3.0 and cryptocurrency and all that goes with that. So it was fascinating to get Mark's view on this emerging technology. And he says himself he can be quite skeptical on these things. So it was really interesting to see how he's approached it and how he sees it evolving. So I hope you enjoy the show. It was a really great chat, and thanks to Mark for taking the time to go through everything with us. Welcome to the show, Mark. Thanks for coming.
Well, great to see you, dear.
There's a lot happening in the world, but there's a lot happening in the Metaverse and Web 3.0, and you're all over it from what I can see.
Well, I sort of, I wish I would feel like I was all over it. It was just that as an old guy, I actually thought something was real here, as opposed to all of my contemporaries who think the whole thing is just a complete load of rubbish and not actually worth spending any time on.
Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Is that you're saying people think that it is rubbish? Or
I think so. I think there's, some group of people who were early into Bitcoin and perhaps early into Ether, they've made money. Yeah. And there's some, I would say, not more than 10 serious family office investments in the area, but broadly people are not thinking this is a serious trend. Most of the old people, I think, have seen it all before. It's a bubble. The kids are all going to blow up. And there's decent amounts of reasons to think that. You watch the meme stock phenomenon in the US, which is probably a cousin of this. And what started out as some clever short squeezes has become more a sort of religious thing. And there's no doubt, as I've said, prices are absolutely crazy in lots of spaces. So a lot of people are going to get hurt here, mate.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is the prices, right? But the other part of it's the technology.
Yeah.
So prices are one thing, but the technology itself and what's going to happen in the space presumably is, I think, revolutionary and sort of lots of. I'm not as involved in the VC space, but in the listed space, even just companies like Roblox, Coinbase, and those sorts of they're the building blocks and similar types of things. I think they're really interesting companies with really interesting long-term futures, right?
So do I. And I think also the sense about the moment that you think that there is real psychic value attached to some of the things you own online, your digital assets, it completely changes the view of what is people's net worth and what is value. And that's the part that people are really, really struggling with. They're perfectly all right sitting there and saying, well, the value of somebody's beach house is whatever the other guy is willing to pay. But you look at the utility value of any of those things that sit in Whale Beach, Palm Beach or Portsea, they're not anywhere connected to the value. And they say, well, hard assets are hard and they're valuable, but they've never seen a bear market about when people are selling up their beach houses, how much those things can go down in value. Yeah,
it's I think for a lot of people, it's just tangible, right?
Mm.
And the more we go online, the less tangible things become, especially when it comes to assets.
I don't understand that, because I watched Punk 6529 or a couple of the other, personalities, Jenkins the valet. Anybody sitting there and saying those guys haven't built tangible assets, they just don't understand what's the value of an income producing asset.
Yeah, but that's what it is, right? I look at my dad, who's sort of old Italian guy, and he would like property because he can see it and he knows that someone can live in it. So that's the thinking. It's not a sophisticated thinking, right? It's a really salt of the earth type thinking, and that's where a lot of people come from when they don't understand something, or they don't take the time to deep dive into it and to understand it. And so I think that's.
And I completely understand the whole bricks and mortar thing. It's a big deal, but. I think the old line guys who said a third in cash and marketables, a third in property and a third in your business, probably good diversification. And what I say to people about all of this stuff is think about, single digits percentage of your net worth and probably low single digits, and think about spending time. This in my view, the metaverse and all this Web 3.0 is a labour market play way more than a capital market play. It's all about your involvement and your time thinking. And it's really about taking back those 2 or 3 hours a day you have on social media, where you're slaves to, the social media giants. You take them back and you earn your own money out of it, create your own relationships, and build your own networks.
Yeah. Did you ever watch that Mark Zuckerberg presentation on the metaverse? It was about an hour-long video. It was really boring, but because it was Mark, and it was very robotic. But he went through, and it really did give a lot of good insight into where it can end up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that or not. But
no, I did not. I'll go back and see it. I'll go back and do it now.
Yeah, well worth watching it. And like I say, he comes across as a bit robotic, as we all know, but it was really interesting to see what his vision is, because he is still articulating ultimately where he sees that company and the metaverse going. And I found it to be quite a useful video. Like I say, it's an hour and about 20 minutes or something, but it's must watch in my opinion, because it just gets you thinking around the possibilities, because he covers the different segments from work where you're talking about the labour market side and all sorts of different ways it's going to integrate into real life. You can just see how that, it might not be a few years, but down the track, this is the way we're going to live and work for, some of us a few hours a day, some of us lots of hours a day. And so to me, it is very real, and it's got a lot of real value. What part of the Web 3.0 do you find the most interesting? Where are you mainly focused?
As an emerging market labour business, that's my number one. In terms of, you've got a situation now where economic migration for people that aren't the 1% of the 1% is extraordinarily hard. And so their ability to actually advance is going to be via the metaverse, via, fintech, crypto, programming, all of those sorts of skills. And so you're going to see migration via the metaverse and Web 3.0. That's my number one thing. And then the second part is, there's no doubt to me it's going to create a completely different framework for the creator economy. So the Kevin Kelly 1,000 True Fans essay, this is the way that his sense of everyone being able to create direct line of sight to their 1,000 true fans, I believe it's going to be fantastic for creative people.
And we're seeing that now, right, with a number of those companies that are going in that field. I think it's not hard to say whether it's mainstream. I guess it's not mainstream until everybody's doing it. Probably buying and selling cryptocurrency is mainstream, but outside of that, the metaverse and that type of thing is obviously a long way away. But you can see where the core, like you say, that 1,000 core followers or whatever it might be, they totally get it.
I think what I say to people, it's not an analogy that helps even people as young as you, but I think this is like radio before the Goon Show, right? What happened when they invented radio was, you started off and they had, let's read a book on the radio, let's see a stage play on the radio. It was only when Seacombe and Sellers and Milligan got together and started creating a different sense of comedy, where the theatre of the mind really ignited. And I don't think we've got that yet in terms of what Web 3.0 is going to look like. As I say, I think Punk 6529 and Jenkins the Valet give you two examples where really clever individuals have found some way to kick off with it, but real shred compared to what's coming. A real,
I don't know who they are, Mark. Who are they?
Oh, really? Go onto Twitter, right, and follow Punk 6529 and Jenkins the Valet, right? Okay. And then just Google both of them. You'll see, right?
Marcel, somebody offered that down?
Somebody offered $10.5 million for Punk 6529, right? And turned it down. And the question is, could his punk really be worth that much? If you read his thread, it's absolutely fantastic. And Jenkins has been able to find some way out of Bored Ape Yacht Club to create his own sort of subsector of a creative writers' room and stuff like that. They're phenomenal examples of early Web 3.0 creatives kicking off and doing something really interesting.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of, you've got a long history in venture capital, private equity, that type of thing.
what's your biggest strength that you bring to this side of things when you've got, or is it just something that you've always dealt with because you've been in that venture capital side?
No, mate. I'm very anything that's got as much hype about this, I'm really deeply skeptical about. I'm a broken market investor, right? So this doesn't suit my game of football at all. Yeah, at all. Yeah, the hype and the craziness and the let's all create a cult and all of that stuff, I really hate it. But underlying it, if you look at global labour share of GDP versus capital share of GDP, I think this is genuinely something that's going to be able to find some way to tilt the world back towards labour and away from capital, which I think is a really, really good thing. Now, I think it's going to create huge problems in equity markets and obviously massive problems in bond markets. But I think there are a whole series of other things that are going to create problems for those two capital markets way more than just crypto.
And why do you think that the crypto side is going to create problems for equity markets and bond markets?
I just think the whole point about it is if you start seeing labour share of GDP go up and profit share of GDP go down, profits go down, stock markets go down. And then the second part, all of that labour push is going to create inflation, and therefore the bond market's going to start going to crap as well. And when you get those two things happening, you can't sit there and say earnings growth is going to continue.
Although everyone seems to be doing that at the moment, even though we're seeing some of that sort of stuff happening, isn't it? In terms of we've got interest rates already starting to go, yields and bonds have got
really
problems.
Nothing compared to what's coming.
Yeah, I agree. No, that makes complete sense. But in terms of your skill set and that type of thing, in terms of what you're bringing to that, the new side of that.
I think my business is going to be an emerging markets business, and I've got form in that area, right? Yeah. So I've got relationships and stuff like that. I think my ability to do mainstream developed world crypto, I'm not a competitor in that space. Yeah. And then the other part is I can be a TradFi to Web 3.0 bridge, right? Because I do understand how big institutional investors think about this, and this space is just not really ready for prime time yet. It's probably 6 to 24 months away from prime time. Now, there's a whole lot you can get it through Coinbase, but the compromises you have to make, a whole lot of people say they're not really true crypto when you start doing stuff like that. So we'll see.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of the same thing, I guess, in terms of your weaknesses and different, coming from different perspectives, especially with all the hype and that type of thing, how do you deal with that and overcome that as you go through that? Or is it just that's an advantage in some ways?
Mate, the problem is because I'm such a cynic, right? Yeah. It's really hard to compete to the people who are willing to just suspend disbelief. So exactly how, when you really don't believe, you can compete about the people who say this really is completely and utterly changed the world. Whereas my view is it's going to tilt the world in a good direction a little bit. Yeah. And it's worth spending time on. And what I say to people is, let's assume you put 3% of your portfolio in crypto and dust the lot. Yeah. My view is there's every chance that by virtue of spending time thinking about that 3%, thinking about DeFi, you're going to be able to make the rest of your portfolio perform better over time. And the portfolio is not a set. This is not a set and forget set of investment markets right at the moment. Yeah. Right. Like even if I was talking to a group of retirees up on the Gold Coast, and they're not going to do crypto, but they got a set of really, really difficult challenges. I mean, if you believe this is late 60s, early 70s, and we're about to do a 12 to 14 year run like that, not easy to figure out where the hell you're going to hide.
Yeah, just in terms of investments in general, not specifically crypto. You're talking about anything, right?
Yeah, assume that you say, I don't want to do crypto, it's stupid, right? I'm just going to not do that. Well, great. So now let's have a conversation about where you do go and invest.
It's
not
actually
easy.
No, it's not, because you've got bonds have got problems as interest rates, as yields go up. you can't really go in cash, which is probably where you prefer to be, because you're going to have inflation as high as it's going to end up. So you can't stay there. So you've got to end up back in equities.
Well, and then the precious metals have, gone absolutely nowhere. So I don't think there's anybody who's thought about this that doesn't have some gold, or in my case, platinum. I got some gold equities. They've been okay, but you don't feel like it's been the party it should have been.
No. It's so, and that only gets harder, I think, as we go along, because you've also got that uncertainty of just what's going on in the world in general, which the war side of things has just exacerbated the problems that were already there and made them far worse, I guess.
All of that supply chain logistics and the idea that you're actually going to create a multipolar world, and you don't know how hard the Yanks and the Chinese are going to push this two poles, then separate into two ecosystems. And the amount that's lost from rolling back, for equity markets particularly, rolling back globalization, it's a huge deal.
But that's exactly where it's going, right?
Yeah,
that's like I say, two systems, and everyone taking a step back and looking after their own national interests, from everything from defence through to energy. Even like sustainability is affected, because you can't have sustainability if you don't have national security first and foremost. And Germany have shown that. Yeah,
but you line up, basically you've got capital in one corner and labour in the other. You've got China, India, Brazil, probably Indonesia lining up in one particular thing, saying, hey, Europeans want to fight over Ukraine and create all sorts of drama. Absolutely your hunt, not ours, right? You got, knocking on 3, 4, 5 billion people, depending on how wide you got to do it. Then you got all the capital and all the economy in Europe and the US saying, death to Russia. And all the demographies behind the people as well. If you rope in Africa, who said, we don't want any part of this fight. So hard times, I think, mate.
And then when on that side, where you've got so many people there that can then go, do you see that in those sort of nations where that Web 3.0 really becomes more popular more quickly?
Absolutely.
Because you can be from anywhere, it doesn't matter, right? And you can operate on the same level as anyone from the West.
And we see it with the coding skills, right? Like, it's hard if you're in a terrible place, Bangladesh or somewhere else, when you sort of start out, but there's somewhere between sort of, $6,000-7,000 a year and 12,000. It's really hard to get from out of a coding school somewhere up to a point. But then there's a point of inflection where those people just get, provided they've got strong English, they get sucked into the global labour force and are on their way to $60,000 a year, which for a lot of these terrible countries is as good as $1 million in our place, right? So, and the amount of pull through, and I mean, it's extraordinary. So I think all sorts of Web 3.0 is going to affect those markets in positive ways.
Yeah, right. That's massive if you look at it from that perspective. What would you say is the best decision you've ever made, Mark, in terms of, might be within this business or it might just be in general?
I think it was acknowledging that I was never going to be a first-rank research scientist, and moving across to commerce. I always wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. I always wanted to be a research marine biologist. But I just wasn't a good enough scientist.
Okay, so business wasn't always on the cards.
No. Not at all.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. What about mistakes and things like that, or challenges you faced along the way? What are some of the biggest challenge you faced along the way, and how did you overcome that?
It's a good question. Personal challenges have been way more significant to me, and therefore trying to figure out a way to balance what you want to do in terms of building the best life with a set of interesting career decisions as well. Because I regard my career as my most important hobby. Like, people say, well, you spend a lot of time fishing and a lot of time traveling. I do. But for me, for a long time, business has been my number one hobby. So it's the balancing that's the really hard thing, trying to figure out how you live the best, richest life at the same time as building a successful career. And I wouldn't say that I've done that necessarily well, but I did always say I was going to work way harder from 60 to 80 than I did 40 to 60. So,
oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the whole point is the health effects of working 60 to 80 are really, really positive. Yeah. And there's a whole lot of things you need to be fit enough to do from 40 to 60. So it wasn't normal. It was not a normal career.
It's funny you say that, because I'm 45 and I've recently started to look at things, and you see old guys like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and even George Soros, any of those old guys who are in their 90s who are still in financial markets and still extremely relevant and love what they do. And I look at that and think, I could do that forever.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think Druckenmiller, all those guys. Yeah. I mean, they do it a different way. Julian Roberts.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I'd not really given that much thought until sort of the last year or so. And I look and think, well, this is the sort of thing you can just do. I don't think I'd ever want to retire. And so I get what you're saying around working harder from 60 to 80, because like I say, you can see that there's health benefits there.
I mean, watch Charlie Munger. I mean, that's a big part. Reading and staying intellectually active is a big part of what's making him hold on. It's really, really positive. And I think that if you end up with that psychology of no, work absolutely flat out and then retire at 65, I think the health effects are really, really bad. I don't think it's a thoughtful way to live. No,
I agree. And I've seen that sort of happen with different people as they've gone along. We've all seen it, where they sort of get to that age and they stop and now they deteriorate because they've put themselves in a position where they're not challenged anymore. And I don't think it's a good idea. No, I appreciate that. Mark, what was the best advice you've ever been given in maybe business or life? But
best advice is never stop reading.
Right.
Simple as that.
And is that the advice you'd give anyone else?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just, the simple thing is, people talk at 80 to 100 words a minute. You can read 400 to 500 words a minute without a stretch, right? Yeah. Without any speed reading or something. And most people have really limited number of war stories. Yeah. So the ratio, and there is just, you can't touch the sides in the books or the magazine articles that are out there to read. Then they don't mind when you stop reading them halfway through, etc. So an hour spent reading is, on any basis, 10x as productive as an hour spent talking. Yeah.
What are your couple of topics that you prefer to read about?
Well, I think you've got to read all of the Buffett and Munger stuff. You've probably got to read Phil Fisher, Phil Correa, a block of the historical people on investing. So that I think is really important. And then I think the classics are really, really important as well. The two books that are really hard that I wouldn't ask people to sort of start with, but I think Life is Poorer without having read In Search of Lost Time, which is Marcel Proust's book. And then also Caro's biography of LBJ is an absolute life-changing, but both of them are a year-long mission. So not the beginning, whereas my feeling is there's lots of other things out there in terms of, just history, biography, all of those sorts of things are important, and fiction's just as important.
I wonder if the younger generation read as much as given their attention spans with, I wonder if that's sort of lost a little bit, some of that, the education side and just the joy of reading as well,
Absolutely. I don't know. It'll be sad.
No, I think it genuinely is. I mean, I've got 4 kids and they're all over 18. I sat down with and it goes to attention spans in general in this sort of day and age. I sat down with my youngest, who's 18, to watch The Godfather, and which is my all-time favorite movie, but it's a long movie. And he tapped out after about 15 minutes because it was he just didn't think it was going anywhere. And it's like, he's for real. This is a classic. You have to stay.
Exactly.
He's like, no, I can't do that, Dad. I'm out.
Yeah.
So, if they can't sit down and watch something that's put in front of them like a movie, I wonder how they go with books and that type, because it's an endless, like, there's infinite amount of knowledge and wisdom to absorb and soak up, right? If you want to, but I wonder with this generation, well, the younger generation, like in terms of that, but that's just me. In business, who's a business person that inspires you the most, and why?
I think, whilst he's not my type of cat at all, I think what Musk is doing is absolutely unprecedented.
Yeah.
Like, the whole idea that you could actually, with a straight face, saying, I'm going to put people on Mars, right? And then set about doing it at the same time as you've revolutionized the car industry, the payments industry, or something like that. I mean, the scale of that ambition is absolutely extraordinary. And then you talk to people, like, I'm not an engineer, but you talk to the engineers about what he's doing at Starship. The idea that you bring the price of a kilo into space from $1 million to 50,000, and just everything else is an absolute rounding error compared to what he's doing in terms of advanced space travel. Just extraordinary. So I spend a huge amount of time thinking it might be a shitty investment and he might have 3 or 4 washout financings, but what he will have done for humanity is absolutely extraordinary. Yeah,
his ability to execute is just incredible.
And simultaneously in all of these different
it's not just one thing, right?
Exactly. And so, Jobs' line about leaving a dent in the universe, Jobs did it, and then Musk sort of 10x'd him. Extraordinary, really. And then there's another sort of guy, maybe you follow him on Twitter, Balaji, who I find absolutely fascinating. There's a book coming out called The Network State, and I think he's making a plausible case that it's the end of the Treaty of Westphalia, and there's going to be a new nature of what the nation state looks like. Yeah.
Right.
I think he's, as people say, when they hear it first, they go, "You're absolutely nuts." 3 years later, they go, "God, I should have listened to you." He's a pretty extraordinary guy.
What's his name?
Just his Twitter
for listeners.
Balaji something, but Balaji.
All right, we'll get Marcel onto that. We'll find him.
Yeah,
that's good.
But the book's coming out. It's called The Network State or something like that.
The Network State.
Yeah.
Is that business, or is that more around the?
He's a massive. He was the first CTO of Coinbase. He's a massive Web 3.0.
Yeah. Got it.
And what I say to people who are interested, if there's people following this who haven't done any of the Web 3.0, Ferriss has got a Balaji interview, but before you do that one, there's a great Naval Chris Dixon Ferriss podcast, which you can listen to 1.2. I think it's absolutely fantastic and a really good summary.
That's a Tim Ferriss one, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They're always good, and the Naval ones are good as well. Business books. What's the best business book you've ever read, or what business book would you recommend? Just doesn't have to be investment.
I think you've got to read the Buffett letters, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you've got to read Poor Charlie's Almanac. Yeah.
Yep.
And then, if you're in the finance business, there's a book called Financier about Andre Meyer, who was the guy who ran Lazard for 50 years, who was Jackie Kennedy's investment banker, and extraordinary. I think that's a really, really interesting book. I think some of the JP Morgan biographies are okay. They never really became the same level as historical biography, but I thought they're worth doing. Yeah. I think then that Munger and Buffett have got a list of other books. So there's a book called Persuasion you want to read. There's a book called 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing that I give people to read. There's a history book called Barbarossa, We Hate on the Russians, this month, but it's a great description of how important the Russian their books are still great books. I don't understand that part. Exactly. Yeah, why are we cancelling Dostoevsky?
Yeah, I saw that too. Some of those things just blow my mind. It's like, well, they didn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's also, yeah.
But you can't, like the way, especially if you see it on Twitter, that people get really wound up about it, and it's unreasonably so. But all logic goes out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
and the ability to have to think on two different topics, not just force. This is my view. No one seems to be able to sit there and go, well, I'll contemplate your thought, and I'll contemplate this thought, and somewhere in between might be right, or what. People just can't do that on Twitter. It's
that's the problem.
Yeah. Have you got a quote or something, just a saying that you've lived by, or anything like that that you'd share?
Not just one. No. I
No.
don't think so.
Nothing specific.
No, look, I'm not a great believer, but I do think the golden rule about do unto others as you'd have them do unto you is probably the best encapsulation of anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Sense of mutuality.
Yeah. Just a bit of common sense too, right?
Yeah.
And so what's next for you in the business?
Just more, mate. I mean, this crypto stuff, I mean, clearly we're going to have 2 or 3 drawdowns, more crypto winters and stuff like that. But I think it's going to change the world. And I reckon there's 20 years of running right now. There's certainly 10. Yeah.
It's going to be 20. It's sort of that next stage of what happened with the internet and is there for everyone to see.
So, it'll see me out.
Right. Okay. Well,
hopefully not. Then hopefully we're going to have the normal. Then we're going to have
4.0.
Exactly. But then we got the normal cycles, right? Interest rates are going to create a credit crunch. There's going to be stuff, and that's going to be way better. The broken market investing going to come and go, and when I've got busted distressed markets, I'll be back doing it.
Yeah. Do you see a problem with people not being experienced with dealing with inflation these days? It's just a separate topic altogether. Talking about different things in markets.
Sure.
As we have inflation coming back, do you see that? Because I see it as a major problem where there's a whole generation of people that don't even know what inflation is.
Well, I was reading an article. There's another Twitter thing, the Octavian report that I get this morning, and they did an interview with Jim Grant, which was wildly out of character. But the point is, interest rates are essentially generational, and that's what's happened. We've had 40 years of essentially a bond bull market and declining interest rates, and somewhere like 2 years ago it changed, and everyone's still saying no. Negative interest rates are normal, negative real interest rates are normal, the accommodating Fed funds policy is normal, MMT's worth thinking about. It's like, dude, you need to relearn the world for this. The number of people who actually experienced the 70s and the number of people who've got in a set of investment settings that are going to deal with that, not happening. Yeah.
I mean, that was the anomaly just recently. Everyone seems to have lived through that and thought that was normal, but that was the anomaly. The low interest rates, and I think it's going to smack everyone in the face at some point soon enough. Just has to.
I think there's another thing rattling around there at the moment. Sorry, just let me try and find it. Just you've got readers in your podcast, don't you? Yeah. So there's a thing from Credit Suisse, a guy called Zoltan, Pozsar. Yeah. And it's called "We Are Witnessing the Birth of a New World Monetary Order." And smart money has come for that article big time, right? They're saying that's really, really good, that a guy in one of the mainstream investment banks is willing to write something as challenging as that. So I haven't read it yet. I've just got it on ready to go, but they say that's a good thing to read.
Okay, well, I'll have to check that out as well, Marcel. You'll make a note of that. That's good. All right, Mark, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate
Great to speak to you.
Going through it. Great to speak with you, and we'll speak soon.